If you love incredible stories about respect and lessons learned, please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so you never miss these amazing true tales. Now, let's dive into this unforgettable story. Marcus Chen considered himself one of the best martial artists in his city. At 35 years old, he owned 3 successful karate dojos across Seattle and had trained students for over 15 years. His walls were covered with tournament trophies, black belt certificates, and photos of him breaking boards and bricks. Marcus had built his reputation on being tough, skilled, and most importantly, unbeatable. When Marcus traveled to London for an international martial arts convention, he brought his ego with him. He spent his days attending seminars and his evenings telling anyone who would listen about his accomplishments. His students back home admired him, his peers respected his skills, and Marcus believed he had earned the right to feel superior to most people, especially those he considered untrained civilians. On his final day in London, Marcus decided to visit Buckingham Palace with a group of fellow martial artists from the convention. As they approached the famous landmark, Marcus spotted the royal guards standing at their posts. He had seen pictures before, but seeing them in person sparked something in him. To Marcus, they looked like toy soldiers, standing still in their bright red uniforms and tall furry hats. "Look at these guys," Marcus said to his companions, loud enough for nearby tourists to hear, "standing there like statues. I bet they have no real training. It's all just for show." His friends laughed uncomfortably, but Marcus was just getting started. He had spent years proving his superiority on training mats, and he saw these guards as another opportunity to demonstrate his skills. The guard Marcus had focused on was Lance Corporal Thomas Riley, a 28-year-old member of the Coldstream Guards. Thomas had served 6 years in the British Army, including 2 deployments to Afghanistan where he had earned commendations for bravery under fire. He was trained in close-quarters combat, weapons handling, and had faced real enemies in real battles. But standing at his post, he looked like nothing more than a ceremonial figure. Marcus approached the barrier, his chest puffed out with confidence. "I bet I could take down any of these guards in seconds," he announced to the growing crowd around him. Some tourists looked shocked. Others pulled out their phones to record what they sensed might become an interesting moment. Marcus's martial arts companions tried to pull him back, warning him this wasn't a good idea, but Marcus brushed them off. "Watch this," Marcus said with a smirk. Before anyone could stop him, he quickly vaulted over the barrier. His years of training made him fast and agile. In one fluid motion, he moved toward Lance Corporal Riley with his hands raised in a fighting stance. Marcus planned to demonstrate a non-contact technique, getting close enough to show he could strike, but stopping just short, proving his point without actually hitting the guard. What happened next occurred so fast that most witnesses didn't fully process it until they watched their phone videos later. The moment Marcus crossed the barrier, Thomas Riley's training activated. His response was automatic, honed by years of military combat training and real battlefield experience. This wasn't his first time dealing with a potential threat in less than 2 seconds. Thomas had assessed Marcus as a threat, dropped his ceremonial rifle into a defensive position, and executed a textbook defensive maneuver. He sidestepped Marcus's approach with precision timing, used Marcus's own momentum against him, and delivered a controlled strike too. Marcus's extended arm that sent a shock of pain through the karate master's entire body. Marcus found himself face down on the pavement, his arm locked behind his back in a hold he didn't recognize from any martial arts tournament. The pain was immediate and intense. He tried to use his training to escape, attempting techniques that had worked countless times in his dojo. Nothing worked. Thomas had him completely immobilized, applying just enough pressure to keep Marcus down without causing injury. Within seconds, 2 more guards had moved from their posts, surrounding Marcus with their rifles at the ready. Palace security and armed Metropolitan Police officers arrived almost immediately, a response so fast it was clear they had been watching and ready. Marcus realized with growing horror that he had made a catastrophic mistake. "Don't move," one of the police officers commanded. Marcus was beyond moving, his face pressed against the cold pavement, his arms still locked in Thomas's grip. He could barely breathe. The pain in his shoulder was unlike anything he had experienced in years of martial arts training. This wasn't a controlled sparring match or a choreographed demonstration. This was real combat technique applied by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Thomas maintained his hold until the police officers moved in to take over. Even then, his release was controlled and professional. Marcus was quickly handcuffed and pulled to his feet, his face red with embarrassment and pain. The crowd of tourists had grown massive, dozens of phones capturing every moment of his humiliation. This was not the demonstration he had planned. Marcus was immediately escorted away by armed officers, his martial arts companions watching in shock as their colleague was led toward a security building. The pain in Marcus's shoulder was intense, and he tried to explain that he was just demonstrating technique, that he meant no harm. But the officers weren't interested in his explanations. In the security office, Marcus learned the severity of his actions. Assaulting a member of the Queen's Guard was a serious criminal offense. Breaching security at a royal residence was a matter of national security. The officers explained that in today's world, with terrorist threats and security concerns, anyone rushing a guard was treated as a potential lethal threat. Marcus had been incredibly fortunate that Thomas had used restraint and non-lethal force. A senior security official entered the room and laid out what Marcus was facing: assault on a military officer, trespassing on protected grounds, public disorder, and potentially other charges. As an American citizen, Marcus could be detained, prosecuted in British courts, and face imprisonment. His martial arts credentials meant nothing here. In fact, his training might work against him. As it showed he had the skills to cause serious harm, Marcus's confidence had completely evaporated. He sat in the interrogation room, his shoulders still throbbing, facing the real possibility of jail time in a foreign country. He thought about his dojos back home, his students, his reputation. In one moment of arrogance, he had thrown it all into jeopardy. The security official left him alone to contemplate his situation. And Marcus had never felt so small. Meanwhile, Lance Corporal Riley had returned to his post after giving his statement. He felt no satisfaction in what had happened, only the professional certainty that he had responded appropriately to a potential threat. Thomas had dealt with far more dangerous situations in Afghanistan. This incident, while unusual, was well within his training to handle. He resumed his position with the same calm professionalism he maintained every day. Back in the security office, Marcus was informed that they had reviewed footage from multiple angles. The videos clearly showed him deliberately vaulting the barrier and approaching the guard in an aggressive martial arts stance. There was no way to claim it was an accident or misunderstanding. His own companions had been recorded on video, trying to warn him not to do it. An official from the American embassy arrived to speak with Marcus. The conversation was brief and disappointing. The embassy could ensure he received fair treatment under British law, but they couldn't protect him from the consequences of his actions. The official seemed more irritated than sympathetic, explaining that American citizens who broke laws in foreign countries created diplomatic complications. Marcus was on his own. Hours passed as officials decided how to proceed with Marcus's case. During this time, he was given medical attention for his shoulder. The examining doctor, herself a former military medic, explained that the hold used on him was a standard military restraint technique, designed to immobilize without causing permanent damage. She told him he was lucky Thomas had such good control. The technique could have easily dislocated his shoulder if applied with full force. The doctor's words hit Marcus hard. He had spent years teaching students about control and discipline in martial arts, but he had never truly understood what military combat training meant. His tournament victories and dojo demonstrations suddenly seemed trivial compared to the real-world application of force he had experienced. Thomas hadn't been trying to win points or impress anyone. He had simply neutralized a threat efficiently and professionally. Late in the afternoon, Marcus received unexpected news. Lance Corporal Riley had been consulted about whether he wanted to press personal charges. After being briefed on Marcus's background as a martial arts instructor, Thomas had made a decision. He was willing to not press individual charges if Marcus met certain conditions, including a formal apology, acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and agreement to make a public statement about the incident. Marcus was overwhelmed with relief, but the officials made clear this didn't mean he was free from all consequences. The palace and metropolitan police were proceeding with charges for trespassing and public disorder. Marcus would be fined heavily, banned from all royal properties indefinitely, and would have a criminal record in the United Kingdom. Additionally, he would be required to meet with Thomas Riley face-to-face to deliver his apology. The meeting was arranged for the following day. Marcus spent the night in his hotel room, his shoulder wrapped and aching, his mind replaying the incident over and over. He watched the videos that had already spread across social media. Seeing himself taken down so effortlessly was humbling and humiliating. The comments were brutal, with many pointing out that martial arts sport training was completely different from military combat training. The next morning, Marcus was escorted to a private meeting room where Thomas Riley waited, now in casual civilian clothes. Seeing the guard out of uniform somehow made the situation more real to Marcus. This wasn't a ceremonial figure or a trained robot. This was a real person, probably not much younger than Marcus himself, who had simply been doing his job when Marcus had attacked him. Marcus delivered his prepared apology, but as he spoke, something shifted inside him. The words he had written felt hollow and inadequate. He stopped reading from his paper and spoke from his heart instead. He apologized not just for the physical attack, but for his attitude, his arrogance, his complete lack of respect. He admitted that he had treated Thomas as less than human, as a prop to boost his own ego. Thomas listened to Marcus's apology without interruption. When Marcus finished, Thomas spoke for the first time. His voice was calm and measured without anger or judgment. He explained that royal guards dealt with disrespectful behavior every day. But physical attacks were rare and taken extremely seriously. He described what it felt like to stand for hours while tourists mocked and taunted him, knowing he couldn't respond. Thomas then shared some of his military background. He talked about his deployments, about the real combat situations he had faced, about losing friends in Afghanistan. He explained that the ceremonial role of Royal Guard was an honor earned through years of service and sacrifice. It wasn't just standing still in a fancy uniform. It represented the British military's dedication to duty, discipline, and service. Marcus listened with growing shame. He had judged this man based on his uniform and position, assuming he was untrained or inferior. The reality was that Thomas had more real combat experience than Marcus would ever have. The techniques Thomas had used on him weren't flashy martial arts moves designed to win tournaments. They were battlefield-tested methods designed to protect and neutralize threats quickly and efficiently. Thomas asked Marcus about his martial arts background, and Marcus found himself being honest in a way he rarely was. He admitted that his training had made him arrogant, that his success in tournaments had inflated his ego, and that he had stopped learning because he thought he already knew everything. The conversation continued for over an hour, and by the end, Marcus felt he had gained not just forgiveness, but wisdom. Before they parted, Thomas gave Marcus some advice. He suggested that Marcus consider integrating some humility into his teaching, that he remember martial arts were originally developed for real combat situations, not sport. Thomas recommended that Marcus research the difference between sport fighting and actual combat. It's between controlled environments and life-or-death situations. The lessons, he said, might make Marcus a better instructor. Marcus left London with a criminal record, a hefty fine, and a shoulder that would ache for weeks. But he also left with something more valuable, a completely changed perspective. The flight home gave him hours to think about his actions and their consequences. He realized that his martial arts training had made him physically strong but had somehow made him mentally weak, feeding his ego instead of his character. When Marcus returned to Seattle, he gathered his senior students and instructors from all 3 of his dojos. He told them everything that had happened in London, holding nothing back. He showed them the videos of his takedown, explained the charges he faced, and shared the conversations he had with Thomas Riley. His honesty shocked his students, who had never seen their confident instructor so humble. Marcus made the decision to fundamentally change how he taught martial arts. He invited guest instructors with military backgrounds to speak to his students about the difference between sport fighting and combat. He incorporated lessons about humility, respect, and understanding that martial arts skills came with responsibility. He stopped promoting the idea that his students were learning to be superior to others and instead emphasized that they were learning discipline and self-improvement. The story of Marcus's incident in London spread through the martial arts community. Some instructors mocked him for his failure, but many others reached out with support and their own stories of hard lessons learned. Marcus discovered that his experience, while humiliating, gave him credibility when teaching about humility and respect. He had learned the hard way, and his students could benefit from his mistake. Marcus started a new program at his dojos, specifically focused on respect and understanding. He brought in speakers from various professions, including military veterans, police officers, and first responders. He wanted his students to understand that real-world application of force was vastly different from sport competition. The program became popular and was eventually adopted by other martial arts schools in the region. He maintained contact with Thomas Riley through occasional emails. Thomas had returned to his regular duties, completing his service as a Royal Guard and eventually moving to other military assignments. The two men developed an unlikely friendship, bonded by the incident that had brought them together. Thomas occasionally provided perspective on military training methods that Marcus incorporated into his teaching. A year after the incident, Marcus was invited to speak at the same international martial arts convention where his journey had begun. This time, instead of boasting about his accomplishments, he told the story of his greatest defeat. He spoke about arrogance, about the difference between sport and combat. It's about the lesson he learned from a Royal Guard who had shown him what real discipline and skill looked like. The speech was received with mixed reactions. Some martial artists felt Marcus was being too hard on himself, that he was diminishing the value of sport martial arts. Others appreciated his honesty and the lessons he shared. Several military veterans in attendance approached him afterward, thanking him for acknowledging the difference between sport training and combat training, something they felt the martial arts community often overlooked. Marcus's dojos continued to thrive, but now with a different philosophy. Students were still taught technique and skill, still competed in tournaments and earned belts, but they were also taught humility, respect for others, and understanding that martial arts training gave them responsibility, not superiority. Marcus often shared his story with new students, using his own failure as a teaching tool. The videos of Marcus's takedown remained online, a permanent record of his mistake. Unlike many people who tried to scrub their embarrassing moments from the internet, Marcus left them up. He occasionally referenced them in his teaching, using them as real-world examples of what happens when ego overrides good judgment. The videos became teaching tools rather than sources of shame. Years later, Marcus would reflect on that day in London as the most important moment in his martial arts career. Not his tournament victories, not his black belt ceremonies, not the opening of his dojos. The moment when Lance Corporal Thomas Riley taught him a lesson he had needed to learn his entire adult life. Real strength came not from the ability to defeat others, but from the discipline to control oneself. Thomas Riley eventually left active military service and became a self-defense instructor for civilians. He sometimes told the story of the karate master who attacked him, though always respectfully and without using Marcus's name. He used it to illustrate the difference between sport training and real-world situations, and to emphasize the importance of not underestimating anyone based on their appearance or position. The painful lesson Marcus learned that day outside Buckingham Palace transformed not just his own life, but the lives of hundreds of students who would train under him in the years to come. His attack on a Royal Guard meant to demonstrate his superiority, instead revealed his ignorance. And in being humbled so completely, Marcus finally became the martial arts master he had always claimed to be. One who understood that true mastery came not from defeating others, but from mastering oneself. The respect he tried to take by force was ultimately given to him freely once he learned what respect truly meant.